Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick, founder of Herbal411.com. Thank you for coming today. I'm going to unbox Inositol. Inositol is a supplement you can find anywhere, but I've had a few patients in my practice ask me about the use of Inositol, specifically Inositol, for their diabetes, their polycystic ovarian syndrome, and their insulin resistance. So we'll talk about that in a second, but if you have been given a diagnosis like that, bring this information to your doctor. If you are not a patient of mine, then you're not supposed to be listening to this, so please turn it off. If you're interested, you can continue listening or become a patient of mine by clicking the link down below to Herbal411. So the idea with this stuff is that it might help the signaling of your metabolic pathway. And I don't want to get into too much of the weeds, but the way things happen in your body is that the day-to-day occurrences of what happens with production of enzymes, hormones, is a very delicate mechanism. The mind gets signals from the gut as far as hunger, satiety, day, night, and then hormones are released. And when hormones, I should say stress and love. But when hormones are released, then beautiful things happen. Unfortunately, everybody's being stressed out, everybody's stuck at home, and everybody's a little bit overweight. So with all those things, the worst hormones are being maximized. And it's not always healthy to have a high level of bad hormones. Now, I don't want to label insulin as bad or epinephrine as bad because they can be useful. Insulin can be useful for getting you your glucose, which is a building block of energy, into the cell, so that your muscles can be used, your brain can produce energy, and that's what we're supposed to do. But sometimes stress or food choices, especially if it's processed food, or eating too much, or eating constantly throughout the day or middle of the night, that stuff, or having that kind of practice will cause your hormone response to constantly make insulin, and it's not supposed to do that. I mean, not that I lived back in the farm days, but people that worked in the farm or on the fields, they didn't snack all day because they had a lot of work to do. They'd only eat maybe 2 to 3 times a day, and in between, and then they'd sleep early, wake up early, but in between the meals, they would essentially starve. Well, not starve, they'd be fasting, and that's the new buzzword of today. So during fasting, insulin drops. During eating, insulin rises, and that's what's supposed to happen. So when insulin rises, then glucose gets put from the bloodstream into the cell, and then you're done. When insulin falls, technically you shouldn't have any glucose, and that's the bottom line. So the problem with eating all day long, eating a snack, having a beverage that has a sugar substitute or a sugar in it, you constantly pop your insulin up all day long. And when insulin's up all day long, it never gets a break. Eventually you become insulin resistant, meaning that your brain, your muscles, your thyroid gland, your adrenals, your gonads, that means ovaries and testicles, they are so tired of seeing and hearing insulin, that they ignore insulin. And eventually, after being ignored, your thyroid, your brain, your muscles, and all those glands I just mentioned, they don't recognize insulin. And if they don't recognize insulin, then they don't get the glucose or energy that they need. So if they don't get the glucose and energy that they need, follow me, they think you're starving. And when they think you're starving, they send a signal to the brain, eat more. And when you've just eaten, but with that signal saying you're starving, you constantly put in more and more and more. So it's a bad feedback mechanism. So that is why those of you who have tried fasting, where you drop your insulin level for a short time, well, some of you for a long time, 12 hours, 18 hours, you actually turn off insulin, you become insulin sensitive. When you're insulin sensitive, like the farmers of the 50s, then the body works better. So, and I know a lot of you will just get tired of all the medicines and you'll give it a try by, say, pushing back your breakfast. And I think that's an easy chore versus calculating your caloric intake per day, seeing what your percentage of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates is, getting your timing down. And I do that with all my patients. I just tell my patients that I see on Herbal411.com, load up the pictures of what you eat and drink for about 5 days to include a weekend, and I'll break it down for you because it's just so much of a pain in the ass to track food. I think the Weight Watchers app, if you're a Weight Watchers person, that's a great app. You just take a picture and it kind of breaks it down for you. But in most cases, if you're a beginner, MyFitnessPal, the free one, the free version is okay, but you still have to enter the data. And then after about a day, and then after about a week, it gives you the average calculations, which is fair. Total calories per day or week, percentage of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. I think it even gives you percentage of fiber. So pretty decent app, but you still have to be able to interpret that and know what to do with it. Everybody has to have a personalized response because the food industry is out there to make you buy their food. And I think the food industry knows that you're probably insulin resistant, so they're going to spike your food products with either a sugar substitute, which can still screw up your insulin resistance, and I'll tell you why in a second, or they'll spike your food products with a very processed food that is just so laden with sugar or simple carbohydrates. And when you have those things, sugar and simple carbohydrates, or the beverage companies will put high fructose concentrates into your product without you knowing it and make it really tasty, you will become insulin resistant because you're going to want that stuff later on. So it's you're fighting an upstream battle, and I'm going to be on your side. So again, it's okay to acknowledge that, but don't do it on your own. It's just so painful. It's painful to starve or be hungry. It's painful to exercise. I get it. And it's painful to see when everybody else is eating around you and they don't mind what they're eating and they're getting heavier and heavier. It's painful to see that and know, oh man, my stomach is growling. But I'd like to flip that around. I would like to tell you that at least I have goals to hopefully live till 100 and have a great grandchild, or at least take care of him, maybe, if I still have my mental faculties, hopefully and watch him go into high school or college. So, and that's another thing, diabetes type 3 is considered a nickname for Alzheimer's disease. So all this stuff is really important as far as lifestyle. So I'm getting a little bit off track. Sorry, I get that way sometimes. But I'd say bottom line with this is that there are some studies, but they're limited. And here's one by Bonomo. And it was pretty good in talking about Bonomo. Here's that. You can look it up on PubMed. But it talks about how to apply inositol in folks with type 2 diabetes. And it showed that there was pretty good response for a type 2 diabetic. So the only problem, it's not a problem, but the type of inositol they used was 500 milligrams of Mayo and 13 milligrams or something like that of D-Chiro. And if you look at this form from Life Extensions, it only says inositol. It does not break it down anywhere. I didn't go on the website to figure out what the combination is, but Bonomo specifically used that in their studies, and they had found after 3 months of using that combination, Mayo 500, D-Chiro 13, a combination pill, twice a day, that the people that had type 2 diabetes after 3 months had a significant improvement in their baseline glucose. That's improvement without increasing medicines, prescriptions, with just the use of inositol. So at that dose, there was no reports of side effects. You can check out the study on your own on PubMed. And I want to talk about that too, because I did my integrative medicine fellowship with the Arizona Center for Integrative Medicine, now called Andrew Wiles Integrative Medicine Center in Arizona. And one of the authors is Scott Shannon. But anyway, there is a short paragraph. Sorry, there's a lot of paper in here, my references. Short paragraph on the use of inositol for OCD, anxiety, and bipolar disease. And it showed potential for it. And again, when there's potential, I embrace it, as long as there's no side effects. The only problem that I bring up with the use was there was supposedly benefit at 6 to 20 grams per day. That's a lot. I mean, so the problem with that amount is there might be a diarrhea issue. because that's so much of an increase in dose that the small intestine has to be able to handle that. And I'm going to talk about the next study, which is Montenegro Study here, and I outlined a couple things. Montenegro Study showed using somewhat of a meta-analysis. That means evaluating all the studies that have been out there from before on its possibilities of use for PCOS, found some side effects. And there are a couple. Number one, and I think I put them over here. Yeah, I did. So number one, if you take sucralose or maltodextrin or sorbitol, which you'll find in gums and some food products, they will block the absorption in the small intestine. So think of it this way. There's one door, and you have myo-inositol that has to go through the door. You have D-chiro that inositol has to go through the door. Then you have sorbitol, maltodextrin, and sucralose that have to go through the door. So if you have way too many things going through the door, only one can get through, and the rest goes into this large intestine, thus the diarrhea. So you have to, and honestly, I would try to get off all this crap. This is not healthy. Sugar is not healthy. Fructose is not healthy. So get that out of your system first, and if you can't get that out of your system, or you don't know how to navigate away from that because it's just so irritating to stop, and that's what happens, is if you just say, I'm going to stop sugar, you're going to have an Herxheimer reaction. You're going to have a withdrawal, and you're going to detox, and you're not going to like it. And that's why I sometimes say it might be good to be on medicines for a short amount of time, just to prepare, because you're not going to like the withdrawal. And the food industry knows that. So there is a blockage. So you have to, that was nice about their study. They indicated that there's an issue. They also indicated that sometimes you can have D-chiro, which in right proportions, which is about 40-1. That's the right proportion that they suggested for having effectiveness for PCOS or insulin resistance. You can have a aromatase inhibitor-like effect. So it sounds counterintuitive. Let me explain. So if you take this for polycystic ovarian syndrome and insulin resistance, it's supposed to help. But if you take too much, it might harm. So there's a small window of therapy. And that's why you have to have the help of a doctor. So if, and one more thing, the other studies, or the other reviews showed that it's hard to find myo and D-chiro alone. So a lot of the supplements that they studied in the sweeping analysis out there from NIH is that you had the inositols plus a whole bunch of other supplements. So it's like, was it just the inositols? Was it the inositol and the berberines? And I have done videos on berberine, which I think is a great medicine or herb for PCOS, insulin resistance, even for elevated LDL or cholesterol. I think it's great. I'll put the link for my berberine video. But ultimately, there's going to be some side effect, and you have to know how much to take. You have to have a limited experiment. So if you do this, I would take a hemoglobin A1C, your glucose levels, and your insulin levels fasting. Do it for about 3 months, like found in the studies, and then take them again. But don't do any other changes during this time. And again, this is just suggestions. Don't take this video as a substitute for your medical advice. Take this information to your doctor, and if they don't know what they're talking about, come see me. I do internet consults, like you can see me in person, but I can help you guide. I can help guide you through this journey, and it is a gauntlet of sorts. But once you get through the door, head first, and get through that detox, it should be smooth sailing, and hopefully you can get off your medicine. So again, back to the diseases. The objective to take care of any of these diseases is you maximize on lifestyle. If you're already on medicines, fair. If you're on medicines plus berberine, fair, maintain that. But if you wanted to try a limited experiment, take your medicines, continue your berberine, that's usually 500 milligrams twice a day, check out my video, and then consider a good inositol substitute or inositol supplement twice a day around the dose that was quoted in the studies, 500 milligrams of myo, maybe 13 to 13.5 milligrams of D-chiro twice a day, and then see what happens. Don't make any changes to exercise. Don't make any changes to nutrition, which hopefully you are exercising and you are following your nutrition, and then repeat your blood test in 3 months. if you're successful, just like in the studies, then you'll see a bump down and hopefully feel a little better. So feeling better might be, in addition to your glucose is lowering, having satiety, not being as hangry, getting better sleep, having your periods return back, decreasing acne. So all those things are part of PCOS and having a good amount of estrogen to testosterone. Now, if you don't know about PCOS, I do have a video on that. I'll put a link down below as well. But you should understand what PCOS is. You should understand what insulin resistance is. I'll try to load all my videos that I've done on all this stuff, not make it too overwhelming. But the bottom line is I think it's worth it to try. If you have a problem with diarrhea or irritable bowel syndrome, just be careful when you introduce anything new. If you cannot get off the sugar substitutes, you might want to get some help with a nutritionist or your doctor first, because that ultimately, if you take all these supplements but you haven't stopped or adjusted your nutrition, I would take care of your nutrition first. And that might be one of the good things about insulin resistance. Sometimes the craving for bad foods is because of insulin resistance. So you can kill two birds with one stone, but you have to have at least a template of a way out. And I think when people have a goal, they will march towards the goal with strength. If you don't have a goal and you're just going to kind of wing it, I'm going to stop all the sugar in the world. It might not get you anywhere. So hopefully this gives you a kind of good idea on inositol. If you have any suggestions or comments about how it treated you, if you had that problem with diarrhea at 6 to 20 as far as a dose, then please put it down below. That's 6 to 20 grams, again, as I said before, but please put them down below, share it with us. If you can share this with other people who are on a journey or just can't get anywhere or are having problems with infertility, that's terrible, but it's sometimes very frustrating. So consider subscribing, and I'll see you at the next video. Thanks for watching.